There is a lot of noise in Australia right now about migration, the pros, the cons. Is it good? Is it bad? What is it doing for society, our communities? What does it mean for the housing market? In this video, we're going to take a close look at the impact of migration on our housing market. And I generally want to hear what you believe and what your opinion is about immigration, population growth, and what it means for the property market. Let's break the whole thing down. So I've been seeing a lot of comments lately saying the same thing. Just cut immigration and housing will fix itself. And I understand why people feel that way. Population growth adds pressure. That part is real. But here's the problem with that argument. Cutting migration doesn't fix a broken housing pipeline. Today, I want to unpack where the real bottlenecks are and why this issue didn't start with migration and what actually needs to change if Australia wants affordable housing again. So let's start with migration because it's always the headline. Net overseas migration has been high. That absolutely increases demand for housing. But here's the part people miss. Migration isn't random. It's forecast years in advance. Governments know it's coming. Housing pressure isn't happening because migration suddenly appeared out of nowhere. It's happening because housing supply didn't keep up with population growth for well over a decade. Now, in fact, I did a strong video on this where I actually do show statistically with data that the population growth over the last 10 years, just this last decade, right, from 2015 to 2025, the population growth in that decade is one of the lowest that we have had in the last 5 or 6 decades. In fact, if you go back to the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, the population growth was a lot higher, but we did not have a housing crisis. Why? Because we were able as a country to build enough homes. So the problem really isn't that migration. It is the broken system, the broken pipeline of new housing supply. I want you to check out that video. I'll put a link in the description to that video. You must watch that video. But before you do that, let me break down the next part. Now, this is one of the most misunderstood parts of housing. People hear speeding approvals and assume homes are being built. But approvals are not building starts and they're not building completions. Right now, Australia has a widening gap between homes which are approved to be built and homes which actually are started and homes which are actually completed. Projects get approved, then delayed by financing, labor shortages, builder collapses, or infrastructure issues with the state governments. Take a look at this data. Dwelling completions do materially lag approvals, and there are multi-year delays. So even when governments say we've approved thousands of homes, those homes may not exist for years to come. That's if they get built at all. You can't house people in approvals, you can only house people in completed homes. This is where the pipeline really breaks. In many parts of Australia, planning approvals take years, not months. Rezoning is super slow and highly political. Infrastructure isn't ready when housing is approved. Basically, most of our state governments on the East Coast are broke. They don't have the money for the infrastructure. By the time a project clears all hurdles, costs have risen so much that affordable projects become unviable and the builder developer cannot go ahead. Developers pivot to higher end stock. So they build higher quality property, charge a higher price to try to make the project work. Or projects actually get canned and don't proceed at all. Planning delays add years to housing delivery timelines. So this isn't about greed. This is about a system that moves too slow for the reality we're actually living in. Another argument I see a lot is short-term rentals. Let's be clear, short-term rentals are not the main driver of the national housing shortage, but they do matter in certain locations. Inner city areas, lifestyle and tourism markets, and in tight rental pockets. Short-term rentals can be a pressure multiplier in these areas, but they are not the root cause. Even if every Airbnb disappeared tomorrow and was put out on the free market, Australia would still have a supply problem. Now, I want to talk about Australia's productivity slump and also the budget squeeze. This is a big problem because Australia's economy has a deeper problem. Productivity is weak, and Australia is running a persistent current account deficit. That mix strains living standards. According to the ABS, GDP per capita was flat in the September quarter and up just 0.4% over the year. When productivity stalls, costs bite, build times stretch, and every dollar buys less house. Less infrastructure is built, there is less capacity for new homes. The ABS also reports a current account deficit of $16.6 billion in the September quarter, with net foreign debt at $1.43 trillion. Here's the connection to housing. Low productivity means slower, costlier construction, exactly what's choking the pipeline right now. A persistent deficit signals we're consuming more than we produce. Spending must shift toward approvals capacity, enabling infrastructure and also a workforce so approvals can actually turn into completions. You don't fix a housing shortage with weak productivity and a stretched budget. You fix it by getting more output from every dollar and every hour on site, and by spending smarter, not just by spending more. Aussies are actually doing their part. What's missing is competent management. If governments keep wasting years in planning and ignoring productivity, we stay stuck. It's time to start fixing the system. Here's the uncomfortable truth. If you cut migration without fixing the pipeline, construction costs will slow further. Labor shortages will get worse. Builder viability will weaken even more. Supply falls even more. So you might reduce demand slightly, but you also damage the very system needed to deliver housing. That's how you turn a shortage into a long-term structural failure. Migration policy and housing policy must move together. One without the other doesn't work. Also, you must understand that our economy here in Australia would not be as healthy and vibrant as it would otherwise be without our population growth. We would have a huge demographic problem. We would have a huge skill shortage. We would not be the economic powerhouse that we are today and as resilient as we are today if we did not have a growing population. For example, even though we're not building enough homes, the building and construction industry overall is about 10 to 15% of our overall economy, and that exists because of a growing population. So unfortunately, because of the spending decisions which we have made in the past and constantly running up our debt, Australia only has one way to fund all of our obligations, all the government's obligations for the next 10, 15, 20 years. That is to have a growing population. Without a growing population, our tax base will shrink and we will not be able to keep up with all of our payments, Medicare, health, education, NDIS. None of that can be funded and paid for without a growing tax base. And the only way to have a growing tax base is to have massive productivity improvements, which we don't have, or to have a growing population. So what does this ultimately mean for you? Well, Australians aren't wrong to be frustrated about housing, but focusing on one lever, migration, ignores the bigger picture. The real fix is this. We need faster approvals. We need shorter planning timelines. We need well-funded infrastructure that keeps pace with the population growth. We need a pipeline that can actually deliver homes at scale. Until that changes, pressure will remain regardless of migration settings. Now, of course, this is a huge positive. If you're a property investor, you're going to create a lot of wealth over the next 10 years if you play your cards right. But for society as a whole, is it really a good thing? So this is Scott Kuru, the daily property update, your 5 to 7 minute update every single day on the property market so that you can be a property insider. I'll see you guys at the next video.